Welcome to Calcio FC, your weekly dose of Italian football culture. On this week's episode, we delve into the career of Serie A legend Juan Sebastian Verón, from his Parma days, his Sampdoria days, his Lazio days, all the way through to Manchester United and beyond. But first, joining me, David Ferrini. In the studio, our Destination Calcio senior writers Dan Cancian and Emmet Gates. We're going to talk about Atalanta and that demolition of Juventus, plus a look towards this weekend's Scudetto Showdown, number 2 against Inter. It's going to be massive, and there's a reason why we're all wearing different shirts, maybe apart from me. This is Avellino, if you don't know. But Emmet has the Argentina on, which we'll get to. And Dan, you're wearing the Atalanta strip. We went to Bergamo earlier this season. You're wearing that Dublin 2024 special edition. Now, statement win by Gasperini and Atalanta. Arrigo Sacchi came out this week and he said that this was a footballing lesson. You wrote that article, Gian Piero Gasperini and Atalanta can dare to dream after the Juventus thrashing on destination.calcio.com. Take it away.
I mean, when Arrigo Sacchi says that it is a footballing lesson, you have to take notice. And it was a footballing lesson. Atalanta were superb. They tore Juventus to ribbon. They tore them to shreds, however you want to say it. And I think that isn't a case to be made for them to be a dark horse just because we are around Cheltenham. They are a dark horse for the title race.
Well, a little bit of a distance, maybe 40 miles, but still, I'll take that.
I meant
a geographic,
we're around it in terms of like time of the year.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Well, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Sit corrected.
Yeah. No, they were superb. They were like so fluid going forward. They look like the Atalanta that we all got to love over the past couple of seasons. You know, that they go 1-0 up, they don't sit back, they go again, and they break you. And I thought it was telling how they were 1-0 up and they had 3 chances to put the game to bed before half-time, and they didn't. And you're thinking, are they going to live to regret this? But they did not, because they came out in the second half, and from the word go, it was again, foot to the floor, and Juventus just could not cope with them. And I think that the reason why the Atalanta are so good now is because everyone thought throughout the season, they have been good in spurts. They've not been consistent as they were last season. They obviously drew it home to Cagliari and drew it home to Venezia, and they lost it home to Napoli, and you're thinking, I don't think they have got what it takes to win the Scudetto, but I think that the win on Sunday tells us otherwise. And Gasperini said it himself, like Atalanta have never been so close to win the league so deep into the season. This may well be the year they do it.
Could be the historic one, Emmet. Pedal to the metal stuff there from Gian Piero, the man himself, and Thiago Motta was absolutely destroyed. The worst loss at home since
October 1967.
For Juventus?
Yep, in the Derby della Mole against Torino.
First game after Gigi Meroni's death.
Really?
Nestor Combin played with Meroni's number 7 shirt on his back and scored a hat-trick, and all while running 39 degrees fever.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did what it took.
I think Juventus needs some of that metal now from in this current side. I think, just to support Dan's point, it was classic Gasperini, the way Atalanta dissected Juventus, took them apart. And I think because the fact that they're not in the Champions League, they're not in the Coppa Italia, they've essentially 1 game a week now. You will get the best of Gasperini's version of football now because it can conserve energy. They can go foot to the floor for 90 minutes or near enough, decimate opponents. So I do think you from now, for the last 2 months, you will see the best of Atalanta.
And I do wonder, to that point, whether there is an element of sort of like, you've written us off too early. Because Atalanta
did.
Yeah.
Atalanta were everyone's darling last season, because they won the Europa League, the way they were playing football. Obviously, it's a lovely story because they're not a big club, traditionally anyway. But then this season, there was a case of, they got knocked out by the Champions League by Bruges out there. They got knocked out of the Coppa Italia.
Very good Bruges lineup, though. Very, very
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to sort of like remember that this is not a team that is built to compete on 3 fronts. Or, Gasperini has molded him into a team capable of competing on 3 fronts, but I think it's still exceptional that they managed to do it. And I do think that there was an element of that on Sunday. Kind of like, right is off at your peril, We are still here. We're still playing the same football that we played last season.
Everyone thought there was going to be dramas after that Lookman-Gasperini, argument, we'll say, when Gasperini threw him under the bus in the post-match presser. That was after that Bruges game. So Champions League, big disappointment for Gasperini, undoubtedly. But Serie A, everyone wrote them off. A couple of weeks back when we had Adam Summerton on the show, we started to then talk about them being in the discussion once more. After we went to Bergamo, it really did feel like Napoli had sort of given them, not a killer blow, but a couple of jabs.
Yeah. There were 7 points adrift from top spot.
7 points now, though, like especially when a couple of 6-pointers, if they can do Juventus and Inter in the same week, that is a statement.
And when you consider that they drew to Cagliari and Venezia, they would be top of the table.
And that's a thing.
I think that was when I thought they were out. When you can lose to Napoli, sure, but when you draw to Venezia and Cagliari at home, I thought, yeah, that's it.
And then you go away to Turin and
Yeah,
thrash
and smash
Juventus.
the 4-0.
And that is the big thing. Like if they can come out, it feels like they've released themselves from the pressure.
Yeah.
The shackles have come off. And after you draw with Cagliari and Venezia, no disrespect to those clubs because every Serie A side is difficult to play against, but it came to a point, obviously, where Gasperini and his side are like, okay, we need to just throw everything at everyone, especially those teams around us, because Inter is on 61 points, Napoli on 58 points now for Atalanta. It's a 6-pointer this weekend against the Nerazzurri, Battle of the Nerazzurri, the black and blue, for those of you who are new to Serie A. But yeah, it's going to be massive in Bergamo, the Gevi Stadium. We've been there. We know how difficult it is to play there. Everyone knows.
And out of those two, you will, as far as Serie A is concerned, you'll have to say that Atalanta are in better shape than Inter Milan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Inter were lucky, can we say they were lucky to draw with Napoli?
Yeah. Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
They were totally outplayed. And I guess they got that goal.
Yeah.
World-class goal, Di Marco. You sit back and you just hopefully see out the game 1-0.
Sure. Yeah. And
lucky
again,
to get over Monza.
Yeah, they weren't great against Monza. I mean, I suppose, the other side of the coin is that's what champions team do. They find a way to like grind out results even when they're not playing well. And Inzaghi said himself, we're not playing well. We've got so many games coming up thick and fast. I can't wait. I think it's going to be great on Sunday. It's going to be. You can't call. I know it's a cliche, but you really can't call it because Atalanta can come out. If Atalanta come out like they did on Sunday,
Inter have less time to recover from their Champions League win over Feyenoord, so that's going to boost their confidence.
Yeah.
I'm not sure their Serie A form is that noteworthy though. Stumbling past Monza, they did well, and that's the thing. They came back. They are the current Serie A champions. They're in the Champions League. They had that champions mentality, just to come back, dig deep, overcome a 2-0 deficit against Monza, who did something similar to what Atalanta did against Juventus. They threw everything at Inter, got those early goals. You'd expect them to then grind out a result. They couldn't do it. Inter had that know-how to get over the line.
Yeah.
So it is about determination, and Simone Inzaghi is no slouch, let's be honest. So that is going to be epic. That's the late kickoff this Sunday in Serie A. We'll get to that in a moment. But
and also, sorry, I'm on all that. Napoli are going to be interesting spectators because everyone now is talking about Atalanta and Inter, but Napoli is
and they've got a banana skin against Venezia. But we'll get to those games in a moment. But the piece that you've written there, you say, well, you've quoted Gasperini, their dreaming is a joy, not an obligation. And yeah, we're going to see how deep, what level are they dreaming on Atalanta? Because I think that they really know that they're in with a chance here.
Yeah.
And you imagine being in that dressing room, the likes of Lookman and De Ketelaere and players like that.
Yeah.
World class.
The thing is... Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's good that Gasperini and Lookman have patched things up after the penalty shenanigans. Gasperini, they hugged on the touchline. I think it was missed by a lot of the cameras ensuring, but Gasperini gave Lookman a hug after the full-time whistle, and he said that he will get the captain's armband before the season's out. So it is good that they've patched it up in a critical point in the season. And I think Lookman's only 1 goal away from his best season with Atalanta. I think he's on 13, and I think if he scores another goal, which he almost certainly will, he'll break his record. I think Rettegui now is on 22. He is 2 goals away from Pippo Inzaghi's 24 in 96-97 when he was Capo Canoniere. And Rettegui would be Atalanta's greatest goal scorer in a single season in the club's history. So there's lots to play for Atalanta, and it's good to see that Gasperini has, he's a touchy character, Gasperini. I think we've all seen it in the past with Papu Gomez, but it's good that he's patched things up with Lookman now and they can go forward.
Well, speaking of Papu, remember that 5-0 thrashing they gave AC Milan back in 2019. That's the kind of thing that they did to Juventus, and Inter's next. So that's what they're capable of. And it isn't just a short-term thing. It's not patchy from Atalanta. It's a Gasperini project of many, many years. Back then, it was Ilicic and Papu and Muriel with that, what a stunning goal at the end there as well. So 5-0. They made Tiziano Crudeli cry. They made him bawl his eyes out. We all loved it.
I think that's key, though, because if any other team in this position, you will say they don't know how to win titles. They're going to crumble under pressure. But Atalanta know how to win titles. They've not won a league title, but they won the Europa League last season. They made it to finals in Coppa Italia. So Gasperini, as he said, there is a long-term project, and he has instilled that belief into his players, and you can see because you don't go away in Turin and just toy with Juventus.
Yeah. And let's be truthful here. It could have been 6 or 7.
It should have been 6 or 7.
They hit the post, they hit the crossbar. De Gregorio made 3 or 4 good saves.
Lovely assist from Vlahovic, though, for that.
Yeah, that was better than Kalalicic's back heel.
The moment he slipped, you just knew the Lookman was going to go all the way and score. That it was. Yeah. I mean, how's your look? That's the thing. When it's just not your day, it's not your day, or not your season, rather.
The 2 defenders combining there, and that's the ferocity of the whole Atalanta side can get forward and cause damage. And going back to Retegui with the Italy games coming up, you're wearing that Argentina shirt, Emmet, and it seems like Roberto Mancini brought him over from Tigre to put him in the national side. He was then taken to Genoa. Gilardino had him for a while. They sold him. Gasperini believed in him. Scamacca got injured, so he brought him in as his replacement, and just shows you how good Retegui, the potential was always there to be unlocked. And is that Argentinian flavour there as well? There's no Papu Gomez, but there is a Retegui now. Yeah. And, could be the best season of an Atalanta striker's career ever. And to surpass someone like Pippo, Super Pippo back then. Yeah. Long hair as well. So
yeah, exactly. And I
brings back the memories.
I think, Roberto Mancini brought Retegui in because he had no other alternatives. Yeah. But now, from Luciano Spalletti's standpoint, he's got Retegui, he's got Moise Kean, both in good form. And I think that gives him something to build on now with the World Cup. Granted, Italy actually get to the World Cup.
Well, UEFA Nations League next week.
Yeah, against Germany.
And that's something we're going to focus on next week on the Culture FC podcast. But that goal, Kolasinac to Zappacosta.
It was like watching Johan Cruyff's Netherlands. It was like
peak 1974.
It was total football. I mean,
Gasperini plays a similar style, doesn't he?
How much more total football can you get than having like a left back and a centre back combined in
with the back heel?
Yeah.
So just focusing on the game against Inter for Atalanta now. I mean, the fans out there must be salivating over this one, the Dare to Dream tag that you've written about on destination.calcio.com. If you haven't read it, go and see it now. Sunday night late kickoff, guys, and Inter having less time to recover post-Champions League. The Geviz Stadium Guide is up on our website. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out on destination.calcio.com. Danny from Hull will absolutely be delighted with that Juventus belting.
So, a friend of the show, Danny.
Yeah, big friend of the show. If you haven't seen that one also, it's on our YouTube and also on the DC TV app. We've got Danny from Hull, Brits Abroad. We spoke to him last year. Robert Jeffs actually commented on that video. Great vid. Love Danny's passion. Who would have thought it a guy from Hull supporting Atalanta? What a club, by the way. And what a jacket. That epic Atalanta retro jacket he had on. Bellissimo, Danny. That's what Robert Jeffs had to say. And we've also got the Bergamo Everything You Need to Know video there. You can leave your comments on our socials, also Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. This is the Calcio FC podcast with me, David Ferrini, and Destination Calcio senior writers, Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian. This is a look back. We're remembering one of the greats. This is a Calcio icon, Juan Sebastian Verón. Emmet, take it away. You wrote a piece, The Little Witch at 50 years old.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm sure both of you will agree, when you see Seba Verón turning 50, you think, oh gosh, I'm getting old. Because obviously as a kid growing up, teenager in the late 90s, early 90s, Verón was at the peak of his powers. He was at the centerpiece of midfield for Argentina. And
football was at the peak of its powers.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously Italian football as well. He was majestic with Samp, and then later Parma and Lazio, and just what a player. And the fact that he's turning 50 makes me feel old.
Well, it's not about you, it's about Verón. So let's get to the great man himself. You're wearing that Argentina shirt. and that's in commemoration of him.
Yeah.
So kick us off where he began his Serie A journey.
Yeah, he was signed by Samp in the summer of 1986. He played briefly with Diego in his second stint at Boca in the first half of 1996. I think Verón played about 17 games, I think, for Boca. And then...
Stunning free kick he scored for Boca back then. So,
exactly. I think to take it off Diego and put it in the top corner, that's
a big call.
Yeah. And
well, if you take a free kick off him, you got to put it in the top corner.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
think
And he was like 20, 21. Like for a kid to do that, even though Diego was 35, 36.
Big cojones.
Yeah, like it's serious, commanding of the personality, even at that age.
It's kind of what he did in Serie A as well. He took control.
Yeah, exactly. He was a leader. And I think that's something that Sven-Goran Eriksson talked about, when he had him at Lazio and briefly at Samp, just how much of a leader he was at such a young age. But so you'd Enrico Mantovani, son of the legendary Samp owner Paolo Mantovani, who Enrico took over when Paolo Mantovani sadly passed away in 1983. And he saw Verón. Not really sure how he got wind of Verón. Must have been, I think it was a videotape. And basically, he showed it to Sven. And Sven broke one of his few rules of signing a player based on the strength of a videotape. That's how far back we're going. Videotapes, audience, younger listeners out there, tapes preceded DVDs.
VHS. Google VHS.
So basically, Sven signed him on the strength of a cassette tape. And he didn't regret it. Samp at that point, the glory days of, Vialli and Mancini were gone. Even the days of Platt and Hullett.
It was transitional.
It was transitional. It was basically Sven's job was to bring in new talent, mold them, make them better, sell them on. And Verón was a shining example of that. He did 2 years at Samp. The second year, they very nearly got relegated. I think Jürgen Klinsmann had come back to try and help out Samp. Then he had left. And then it was a mishmash of a team. Sinisa Mihailovic was still there. You had Verón. I think Bogassian was still there.
Yeah.
I think Vincenzo Montella was there. It was a mishmash of a squad, I think, 97, 98. And then he moved.
Christian Carambau
was there, yep. Like it's a...
He won the champion. He left Sampdoria to win the Champions League the following season with Real Madrid.
Real Madrid, yeah.
Like
Abarigo Ivani was there at Samp.
Yeah, so like it is, that Samp era is a bit, there's experience with a dash of youth.
Some players at the end there, and we have to remember it was 90 Serie A, so still, if you're playing in your 30s, you're getting a bit slower, it's tougher than being out there these days, let's be honest. Modern football is still, it's quicker pace maybe, but there's a lot of intelligence needed back then, and you could get away with a lot more kicks to the shins.
Exactly. And then so in the summer, of 98, obviously Argentina go to France. They make it to the quarterfinal. Verón is right in the heart of the midfield. It would have been Fernando Redondo, but he had an argument with Daniel Passarella. Daniel Passarella wanted all of his players to have short hair, which is why Batistuta eventually relented and cut his hair short. For if you watch France 98, Batistuta has short hair, or it isn't as long as it usually was. Redondo refused because he was an individualist, and so basically then the midfield was based around Verón. So he gets a move to Parma. And I think when you look at the great Parma sides of the 90s, this one is basically, it's the one that people most remember. You have Verón, you have Crespo, you have Chiesa, you have Buffon, Cannavaro, Thuram, Dino Baggio, Fusera
and
midfield.
that kit they had.
Yeah, the hooped.
Yeah, the yellow and blue hoop.
Yeah, that is the Parma side that people remember from the 90s, the glory years of Parma. And Verón, again, was the fulcrum in midfield. Alberto Malassani played a diamond formation, and Verón was basically the trequartista, or the number 10 behind Crespo and Chiesa. And Parma were probably good enough to win Serie A that season, but because they were in 3 competitions, they had a good 12, 13 players. They didn't have the squad. And I think when you look at that Serie A season, 98, 99, a really uninspired Milan side win it. It's probably the worst Milan side of the decade, and they somehow won the title.
Yeah, no one expected them to come from where they did. That was when Udinese was the peak of the powers as well.
Zaccheroni first season Milan would be off. Yeah.
But I think Parma and Lazio were actually better teams, but Lazio ended up winning the Cup Winners' Cup. Parma then ended up winning the UEFA Cup and the Coppa Italia. Yeah. So they couldn't juggle 3 competitions, both teams. But Verón was like, he had 14 assists, I think, in that season. And if you go back and watch the highlights, it should have been a lot more. The amount of balls that he fed Crespo and Chiesa, and they missed a lot of chances. But Verón was spectacular. Just this is where he become a leader. And then he has a falling out with Malasani. Malasani wants him to the next season to play as a number 10. Again, Verón's like, no, I want to be in the thick of the action in the centre of midfield. So then Sven gets on the phone, come to Lazio. If you come, we'll win the Scudetto. And he makes this promise to Sergio Connolly. He's like, if you sign Verón, we'll win the title. And sure enough, he comes to Lazio for 99-2000 and they win the title on that famous last day that we all know. In the pouring rain of Perugia, Juventus are in a quagmire. The pitch is flooded. They lose 1-0. Lazio get a routine win over Regina. Verón scores a spectacular free kick. And so Sven does it. He wins the Scudetto. Verón's a massive part in that.
Marcelo Salas and Simone Inzaghi days.
Exactly.
Yeah. Alan Boksic was still there as well.
Yeah, and Mancini was there. Mihailovic was there. Nesta, Nedved.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at that team, you kind of could foresee the financial problems that were up around.
Well, yeah. I mean, exactly. Those issues even reached Australian papers, so that's how big it was. But
and they had
Sergio Contessao was there.
Yeah. They had sold Bobo Vieri the summer prior to Inter, and they bought Diego Simeone and Verón in midfield. And Diego Simeone said, him and Verón, it was interesting because Diego Simeone said they weren't friends, even though they're both Argentine. They dressed next to each other. They would say hello, and that was it. They were completely different characters, but on the pitch, Simeone said, I would die for Verón. And Verón said the exact same thing.
That's what it's all about.
He was my brother. If anybody comes at him, you're coming at me. Yeah. And they battled for each other. And that was the making of Lazio's team. Having them two in the centre of midfield.
They've also spent time together at international games, so that even though you might not be the friendliest with those players, but you can still get along on the pitch. And at the end of the day, you're paid a large sum of money, we'll say, to go out there and win Scudetti. And back in those days, to win a Scudetto as a Lazio side, and we saw what happened with Roma when they signed another Argentinian, Batistuta. They eventually won theirs. So 2 years in a row, where in the capital, each side.
Rome ruled for that brief 2-year period.
2 years.
Rome ruled.
And no one expected it.
Yeah, and as you said, David, Fabio Capello said, or it might have been Totti, one of the two said, one title in Rome is worth 10 in Milan or Juve because the pressure's so intense, because they're both not historically massive clubs, they're not a traditional superpower. The fact that Lazio won that Serie A when they sold their best striker the summer before, it was amazing. And what gets lost, I think, people always remember that afternoon in May when Juve lost in Perugia. But the fact that Juve were 9 points clear of Lazio by the beginning of April and Lazio clawed back to overtake them on the final day. There's a game against Juve in Turin when Carlo Ancelotti was Juve manager then. And it was basically Zidane against Verón in midfield. And Verón crosses for a glancing Simeone header. And that basically, Lazio won and that reduced the deficit to 3 points. And it made Lazio believe that they could do it. Then Juve lost to Verona, I think, a couple of weeks after that. And then it got to the point where Lazio overtook Juve on the final day.
And you've written about that in your piece.
So then, obviously, they win the double that season. They win the Coppa Italia. Verón stays another year. Lazio assemble a super squad at that point. They sign Hernan Crespo. They sign Claudio Lopez. Sven, when I interviewed Sven a few years ago, he said the plan was to win the Champions League. Then Kevin Keegan gets sacked in the bowels of Wembley Stadium. England FA come and approach Sven to be England team manager. Basically, Sven's idea was, I'll balance Lazio with the England job for the remainder of 2000-2001. Basically, he can't do it. He can't concentrate or focus on do two jobs at the one time.
Now it's even insane to think he even thought about it.
Yeah, exactly. And Lazio then, towards the Christmas, Lazio kind of tail off. They get dumped out of the Champions League at the second group stage. And basically, Crespo's not scoring. Lazio shattered the world transfer record to bring him in. I think Sergio Conceição goes to Parma as part of the deal. But if you look at that Lazio team, they're in my opinion, they're one of the best squads to never win a Serie A title. You had Verón, Nedved, Crespo, Claudio Lopez, Mihailovic, Nesta, Negro, Favalli,
Pancaro.
Yeah. It's a super team.
Peruzzi in goal as well,
Peruzzi. Dino Baggio joined as well, but they could only finish third.
Yeah. But it also goes to show like how difficult it was to win the Champions League back then, because the two groups. I mean, I wasn't a fan of the two group stages.
Yeah,
but you had some teams in there where, I mean, Valencia came out of nowhere. Valencia were one of the teams that actually knocked Lazio out.
Yeah,
they came out of nowhere for those 2 seasons, and you couldn't lay a glove on them.
Nah,
and it just goes to show how it was so difficult for them, because you look at the squad now, you're thinking they should have won 2-3 European Cups.
Yeah.
Easily.
Exactly. I think in Verón's first season, Lazio played Valencia in the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
And they got smashed 5-2.
Yeah.
And Sven told me to this day he still can't explain how that happened, because he felt that Lazio were good enough to win it. But the Spanish side just completely overran them.
The underdogs sometimes run you over. That's it.
That Lazio team now, you will call it a super team. I don't know.
Yapstam.
Yapstam.
Yeah, Yapstam came from me.
Ivan de la Peña.
Yeah, Lazio didn't sign. Lazio were so impressed with Valencia that then they signed Mendieta the following season.
Yeah, as a replacement for Verón.
Yeah.
So he did another year at Lazio. It wasn't successful. They didn't win anything. Sven had resigned then, I think, in the January, to take over the England job full time. I think, is it Zaccaroni comes in, or Dino Zoff comes in? Comes in basically to see it through to the end of the year. Lazio then, the financial problems are starting to mount, and then Nedved gets sold, Verón gets sold, Salas gets sold. So Verón goes to Manchester United, and obviously Dan will know more about this than I do, but Sir Alex Ferguson was looking to change the way he approached European games. United had been found out a couple of times post winning it in '99. The 4-4-2 was kind of dying a slow death. Ferguson knew he needed to change, and Verón, there was a game against Real Madrid where Fernando Redondo controlled the game. United were reigning champions, and then Redondo was so good that Ferguson basically said, what does he have in his boots, a magnet? Because the ball just was sticking to him all the time, and he needed a Redondo. At that point, Scholes wasn't it
was just a flat 4-4-2 with having Scholes and Keane in midfield.
Yeah, and Scholes was more attacking than he would become later on, where he kind of become a regista almost and dictating the play. So he needed someone like Redondo. And he looked around and he said, Verón's the man, brought him in. And I think he gets an unfair rap in that a lot of people call him a failure, but I think in a lot of ways he was ahead of his time. English football wasn't ready for someone like Verón. And United, as I mentioned in the piece, a lot of United players mentioned that he was almost too advanced for what English football and United was at the time.
I think that if you speak to United fans, you'll find that every one of them, of us, just like we massively regret. No, because I remember when he signed, I was buzzing. I couldn't wait to see him play. I was like, I begged like to get his shirt. The only reason I couldn't get his shirt was because they didn't have the right size, and I didn't want to like wear something that was like 3 sizes too big. But I was buzzing about, and I remember my dad saying, the fact that he's brilliant in Italy doesn't mean it's going to be great at United. But back then you're thinking, he's a phenomenal player. Of course, it's going to be phenomenal.
It's all about adaptation, isn't it?
Yeah, but it wasn't, and you could see there was a time in his first season where Fergie knew that he probably got it wrong, and the media kept asking him about, why would you sort of fix something that isn't broken? Because like United was still by far the best team in England, and he had the famous line, he's a bleeping great player, and you're all bleeping idiots during this press conference. And it was. I mean, there were a couple of games. You think about the Spurs game when United were 3-0 down at White Hart Lane, won 5-3, and he was in his element, pulling the strings. It was a massive reason why United came back to win that game 5-3. Same when, it was United to beat Arsenal at home in the league, and it was superb in that role. And, there was a game away at Derby County, scored an absolute cracker. United went up 2-1, then dropped points. It just never worked out because I think people perceived him as slow, but not just slow on the pitch. It was sort of like, he's slow, he doesn't care enough. He doesn't have the blood and thunder sort of ethos that we've come to associate with English football. But as Emmet said, it was ahead of the curve. And also, you look at it, once he left United, then Ferguson completely tweaked his approach. He still played like he had Verón, even though he didn't have him, because he went from a flat 4-4-2 to a more sort of like 4-5-1 with Scholes, just over Nistelrooy, who arrived in the summer of 2001. And then he basically, whenever, instead of having another striker up front, he would just put Solskjaer wide on the right, which then led to Beckham being sold because Ferguson realized that Solskjaer was so good out wide on the right, he didn't need Beckham there. But that's for a whole other story. And then I actually thought when Verón went to Chelsea, I thought this would be the perfect environment for him because Chelsea were a more European team.
Yeah.
And he scored on his debut against Liverpool.
Yeah.
And then Crespo came in as well.
Yeah.
But it never quite worked out for him. I just thought, as you said, it was ahead of the curve. But he's the sort of player that if a Premier League team signed the likes of Verón now, you'd be thinking, oh gosh, he's going to thrive into this team.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a player like him these days?
No.
Because he, as you said, they wanted to play as a number 10, but he'd like to play a little bit deeper in midfield, more as like a number 8, maybe.
There's no players like him because you need to be an athlete to play football in that role.
He was
also to have that brain.
Yeah, he was an artist.
Yeah.
But just going back to his impact at United, he didn't have any great impact on the pitch. But when United signed him, I remember being at school and a lot of my classmates would have a tape around their calves because that's what he was famous for.
Yeah,
and we were told off for wearing it. And obviously, it wasn't actual the tape the players would use. It was most like just tape that you used to tape something and so on. And we see lots of this lasted 12, 13, knocking about playground and being told off by the teacher for wearing that because obviously you couldn't do it. And then you'll have to rip it off and it was bloody painful, let me tell you, because all your hair would get stuck underneath and you basically try and rip it off. So that's my main memory of it.
And I think the thing about Verón too at Man United, you have to remember these United players had seen it all. That most of them were still there from '99. They played with Cantona. They played with all these world class players. But Verón was so good in training. Sometimes training would stop because he would do something, and they would all turn around and go, "Did he just do that?" Like Rio Ferdinand recalls, he scored like a Rabana from a halfway line, and it basically shut down training. They were like, "Did he just do that?" He was, and they had seen everything.
It was like the Napoli players with Maradona around.
Exactly.
Similar for them.
Verón, he also, the problem was that he was the first player from a completely different culture to come into the environment because back then the core of United was British. Obviously, you had Roy Keane and the Irishman like Roy Keane and Dennis Irwin. They were the old Scandinavian. Yes, people on with Peter Michael and Van Nistelrooy coming in there, but it wasn't what you would say a sort of a global dressing room, so to speak. And obviously Verón was being Argentine. It was a completely different environment for him, and having become such a world-class player in Italy, I don't think that was the right.
Yeah, and let's not forget, back then, players were leaving Serie A to kind of finish up abroad.
Yeah, exactly.
And England was one of those leagues that were dying to have some of the big names from Serie A come over, or from your Real Madrid and Barcelona. They would interchange in amongst some of the bigger English clubs. And, 11 goals there at Manchester United, just the one at Chelsea, but 25 for Italian clubs, Sampdoria, Parma, and Lazio. He scored 4 more at Inter. Finished up at Estudiantes.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on Juan Sebastian Verón? Your piece is one of those special pieces. If you haven't read it, go to destination.calcio.com and read that. It is titled Juan Sebastian Verón at 50, the little witch who dazzled Serie A. Maybe you can finish off with his nickname there.
Yeah, I don't want to butcher the Spanish pronunciation. La Brujita, which basically means the little witch, because his dad, Ramon Verón, who played against Manchester United in the 60s.
In the Intercontinental Cup in 1968.
Yeah. So I think he was obviously had that little witch kind of nickname. Well, not little, but Verón Jr.
adopted
it. But I just think he's an artist. Verón was an artist, and he was an all-round midfielder. He had energy to burn. He was elegant. He could pass. Sven-Göran Eriksson called him a genius,
and he was.
And you consider the caliber of players that he coached throughout his career. For him to call Verón a genius, I think that sums it up perfectly. And I think just go on to YouTube and just enjoy him.
Took Lazio to a Scudetto back in the era, the golden era of your Batistutas, your Rui Costas, of your Shevchenkos coming in, all those kind of players around.
The Seven Sisters.
And that is the influence that Juan Sebastian Verón had. Argentinians love him. Serie A fans love him. 78 goals at club level, 9 more for Argentina. Finished up in 2014-15. So he did last. He had a bit of longevity back in his career.
He was nearly 40.
Estudiantes and plenty of Estudiantes highlights there. But we'll finish up there. Juan Sebastian Verón, our Calcio icon. That's it for this week from me, David Ferrini, and Destination Calcio writers Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian. You can contact us at DSTN on X or our personal ones. I'm at David Ferrini _ Emmet.
At Emmet Gates.
At Dan _Cancian.
For everything Italian football and culture, be sure to join us every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube for the next episode of Calcio FC. And don't forget, you can watch action as well as highlights from Serie B through tv.destinationcalcio, the website, or by downloading the app on iOS or Android. Stick with us this weekend on our socials as usual. Feel free to leave your comments. The destination, guys, is always Calcio.